Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Changed My Life. I know we've been neglecting this a little bit lately. It's been a few weeks since we've had a show, but we're back. This week's guest is Aaron Anspach. Aaron was a former national runner-up at Penn State and went on to coach as a volunteer assistant with Cael Sanderson. And now he's a sales representative in the financial services industry. So we share a lot of fun stories about his career, what it was like wrestling at Penn State, what it was like working under Coach Cael. So hope you enjoyed this one. For past episodes, please visit WrestlingChangeMyLife.org. Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, I was a fanatic. There's no doubt a fanatic. My goal was to get carried out of the wrestling room because of exhaustion, and it never happened. The thing it did for me every day about 6 o'clock is that when I got out, I looked back in and there was nobody else there. Bottom line was I didn't reach my goal. So guess what happened? I went back in the room again. But I got some quality time because of just some kind of a fanatic goal.
Yes, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on, Ryan. Interesting how we kind of met there on the plane, and cauliflower is the common denominator against all of us, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So for the listeners, I was boarding a 6 a.m. flight to Detroit, walking down the aisle of the plane, and I see this guy who's just savage looking, cauliflower ears, big dude, well dressed. So I sat next to him, and it turns out it's Aaron, and he wrestled for Penn State, and went on to coach with Cael, and is now in a sales role. And so we bonded, and that's how we got to this point, man. So it's been 3 weeks of knowing you now.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a good relationship.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, just to start, I know we talked about this. I'd love to just take us through a background on how you got into the sport and what your wrestling career looked like, and kind of what you're doing now.
Awesome, Ryan. Yeah, so just to start from my childhood, my father wrestled Jim Anspach. He wrestled at RIT, which is a Division III school up in Rochester, New York. He was, he says it's mediocre, but he qualified for the D3 national tournament his senior year. And I don't know if he might have won a match or something, but anyway, wrestling's been in my family, cousins, uncles, always been around. So I've always been exposed to it. And my dad, pretty cool in his part, where he never really forced me into it. He just kind of led me, I guess, to the water and would see if I would drink, kind of thing. And as a little kid, I was the worst wrestler in the world. Funny though, I pride myself on all the trophies I acquired because I was always the big kid when I was little. So I would show up at these tournaments, and there'd maybe be 3 or 4 guys in my bracket. So I walked home with a lot of trophies, but the elementary, it was fun. All my buddies did it, so that's kind of what kept me in the sport. I would say, Ryan, that I didn't really grasp wrestling and enjoy it until, honestly, I hit junior year of high school. And that's kind of I guess when I hit puberty and started to grow in ways and my body transformed a little, and kind of realized I kind of had a gift a little bit in the fact that I had some, athletic ability essentially that, for my size was maybe a little bit unique. So I really, started at that point to kind of, put more emphasis into it. And truthfully, my story to how I got to Penn State was kind of unique in the fact that I not to brag, but I was an all-state defensive end, and I was being recruited by the University of Delaware to go play fullback for those guys. Pretty much had my mind made up that I was going to go there, kind of verbaled in that fact. And long story short, my senior year, I went undefeated until the state finals match. My high school has only had one state champion prior. I think that was in 1960 or 70s, a gentleman named Bob Bell. It's kind of a big deal. And, going into the state finals, I was going to be wrestling this kid named CJ Wansettler, whose brother was currently at Penn State, and he was on scholarship to go to the university. Anyway, long story short, match was going the way I wanted it, envisioned it. Trained my butt off for it. I was getting up early in the mornings running. This is all I could think about was winning gold at Hershey. And I was winning 3-1 with 10 seconds left. I had a mental mistake, got taken down, did not escape, went into overtime. CJ shot off the whistle, and I lost the state finals within 20-second span. So, that I bring that up and I share that with you because that really is kind of the loss that has kind of guided me and something that I really always lever back on as far as like just life lessons I've learned. And I'm sure everyone listening out there has those losses too that they can really pinpoint that, you know, the pivotal point in their life. So anyway, at that point, that's kind of what brought me to the decision of I was bitter. And I used to say it, more or less, I was just a bitter guy. Like I was like, it shouldn't have happened that way. I saw it going a lot of other different ways. I was being recruited by, you know, a lot of local PA schools. No huge programs except for Penn State was asking me to be basically a preferred walk-on. So anyway, I decided that I wasn't going to play football and I was going to go to Penn State. I was going to, you know, beat this CJ guy and university. That's literally what took me to Penn State University. My ego and arrogance and just, you know, being bitter and, you know, just wanted revenge essentially in a kind of a way. So go to Penn State. At the time I went, now one of my best friends who's in the UFC, Pat Cummins, he was there, starter. He's a two-time All-American for us. He finished second his senior year. So I redshirted I was going to be redshirting my first 2 years no matter what, kind of do that going in. However, got there, things didn't go to plan for myself or CJ. I had a shoulder surgery after my first year, which I redshirted, tore my labrum. And that basically took me out for 6 months, rehab, had a orthoscopic surgery, came back, rehab back, and then getting back, you know, this would have been the end of my, I think, sophomore year, I retore my shoulder. At that point, they put a cadaver in there and basically give me the ultimatum of like, Aaron, I don't know if you're going to be able to compete again. It's pretty, you have a likelihood of this, that your body accepting this, you know, another person's body essentially isn't very high. But if it does, you know, you're going to have to rehab, and it's going to take a while. So long story short, Ryan, is I spent about 2.5, 3 years of rehab before entering into my junior, which is my fourth year in school. At that point, my good friend Joel Edwards, he bumped up to heavyweight, not knowing who, you know, he was a 97-pounder all his career, but we also had Phil Davis at 197, so it just made sense for him to come up. And Joel beat me in wrestle-offs that year. So had a couple of, like, limited experiences where I got out to wrestle once or twice where Joel was sick or injured, but he was the starter. He earned the spot. He, you know, obviously he came a little bit short. He was around the 12 that year at the national tournament. And I'll tell you, Ryan, at that point, I made up my mind. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm sick of being the backup. I'm sick of being like nobody. You know, my buddy, one of my best friends, Phil, in the UFC, he was getting all the praise because he was, you know, going to, I think he was a national. No, he didn't win yet. He took second. Four-time All-American, he took second, and I wanted to be the guy is really what I wanted to be. So that summer I made a decision where I was just going to essentially train and be that guy. And long story short, had 4 losses that year. 3 of them that were Cole Conrad. I lost to I'll tell you the first transition for me where I knew I had a special gift or I knew like I could do this at an elite level was Penn State. There's this mountain called Mount Nittany. If anyone's ever been there, it's awesome. It overlooks the whole campus. It overlooks the whole city of State College, or town of State College, I should say. However, we would go run this, and we would run out there, and the goal was to essentially run every step. And you know, our lightweights could do it in under 10 minutes. Us bigger guys were somewhere under 15 to 14 to 30, whatever that would be. But the goal was never stop your feet moving, never walk, never put your hands on your knees. And I'll tell you, the first time I ever completed that with running the whole time, it just switched in my mind. I had a mental switch where I'm like, I will wrestle through every position. I will tire someone out. I will go until there's like that quit attitude where it's either him or I'm going to quit. And that's the visualization now that I use, or I should say when I was wrestling at that time, it always went back to when I first completed that trail, I guess you could call it. Yeah.
Where were you? So was that your junior year or earlier? Like, where were you at when that happened?
So that was going into, that was fourth year going into my fifth year. So
got it.
Junior, essentially into my redshirt junior year into my redshirt senior year. Yep.
Wow. So that's where it just it switched for you. And you know, during that journey you were on there, from when you lost the wrestle off to ultimately when you made the national finals, were there days where you woke up and weren't feeling it, or were you just so motivated from this that you were just in the zone that whole time?
Great. You know what? I don't think any wrestler honestly can look at themselves and say, every day I get up and this is the best thing in the world. I mean, you wrestle, you tell me, like, there's just days where this is not, getting your head beat in or getting up at 5:30 to drill is like, it's not something you want to do. But I was so ingrained in being a national champ and just like having success at that level and wanting to be the guy at that time for Penn State that it drove me past any of those feelings or like days where I just didn't feel like it, if that makes any sense at all. There were tough days. There really were. And I honestly, through my shoulder injury, kind of had to readjust my whole style where I would get in on shots and have my extension be extended. And I really adjusted that to what worked for me and just a style that was more compact, but a lot of movement, a lot of just fakes and tiring individuals out. And yeah, it was a lot of work. I'll tell you that, but it was all worth it, obviously.
Well, man, you're the epitome of persistence, because so many times along the way, you might have thought, all right, this is my break, and it turns out it wasn't. The injuries were brutal. And then losing the Wrestle off that late in your career could have been really tough. And then obviously even losing in the national finals, of course, was probably it was bittersweet. You made it there. It's an incredible accomplishment that probably less than 0.5% of all wrestlers ever experienced. But at the same time, it was probably devastating that you didn't win. So, I mean, I'm just thinking about it. You just persisted through all that stuff. And it sounds like the big thing to me is that you made a choice. And like, maybe you got a little bit technically better, but mentally you made a choice, and that set you on the path. And from there, you just said, no, this is mine. I'm going to take it. Like, it was just that choice you made.
You said it best right there. I think if I'm relating, I rate wrestling every day to my actual life, and we have a choice. Everything we do is a choice, truthfully. Meaning, and this is a perfect example. I'm in the car right now driving to my next appointment, and we'll get in, I guess, what I do a little bit later. But yeah, essentially, I've been trying to get a meeting with this guy for a long time. Last night had a host. I was taking guys to the Red Wings games in Detroit. I live in Chicago. Took guys to the games, got home at 1 a.m., was planning on working from home today, but I've been trying to get in front of this relationship that, essentially I couldn't do it until today. And I got an email literally this morning at 8 o'clock that said, Aaron, I can meet you for lunch. Well, I wasn't planning on driving 2.5 hours out in the field today, but, my choice was, well, I can sit at home, work from home, or I can make the most of this opportunity and attack this potential sale. And that's a choice, So I made the choice of, I'm driving 5 hours for one lunch meeting, but that's the choice I'm going to make because it's either the harder choice or it's the right choice, in my opinion. And I totally agree with what you just said there, Ryan, as far as there was choices to be made. And literally the choice was a lot for me and with relating to wrestling was, am I going to be tougher in my situation? I technically, I'm not taking anything away from the coaches I wrestled for. They gave me a lot of, they were great technically. But obviously Cael Sanderson, if you want to talk about technical and his staff, there's no one, I mean, obviously there's guys out there that are awesome, but in my opinion, there's no one better in the game. They're doing it at the elite level. And I don't think my technical aspect of my wrestling really evolved until I got to go with those guys and be a part of their staff. But choice-wise, my mental toughness and that aspect of my life, that was all made from a choice I was going to make, and that was made from the choice where I was going to run every single step of that mountain, and that translated into obviously the success I had in my senior year and thereafter.
Dude, you're an animal. I love it, dude. I'm getting fired up right now.
Man. I know. I'm still the same way.
Well, you talk about Cael had that much of a different or the level of technique was just that much more, huh? Like it was just that obvious that they were on a whole nother level, huh?
I'm telling you, Ryan, and I don't want to give any of his secrets. Going to the Big Ten too, I don't want to give anything. No, I'm joking, but Cael and they do stuff that I had not seen until I was exposed to their coaching, and I say they. I'm really referencing Cael, Cody, and Casey Cunningham. Cody Sanderson and Cael Sanderson, obviously. Their techniques and their and really positioning of how they get their wrestlers to, they adapt to each wrestler. Obviously, they don't have one style and that's it. They help make each wrestler turn their strengths into their perfections, and their weaknesses into strengths, essentially. But they just technique as far as positionally, if you're getting into positions they've never been in. I have not been around anything like that prior, and it was pretty amazing to watch Cael and just learn from his tutelage of like how he's a student of the sport and he's ever evolving, and it's pretty incredible, truthfully. And I'm more than happy if you want more questions on him and what his philosophy is. I'm more than happy to dive into that.
I'd love to know, how does he think about winning and losing and goal setting?
Awesome. Perfect question. It sets me up. At Penn State and their philosophy, there's no, I don't want to say emphasis on winning and losing. Obviously, the ultimate goal is every year to win a national title. That's evident. No one's in that sport not to win a national title. Their philosophy and their essentially motto, or whatever you want to call it, is we want to give our God-given abilities, and we want to represent God in the best capacity possible, and we do that through giving our absolute everything every time we step on the mat, having fun, and essentially not worrying about win or losses, but worrying about the effort we put out. That's it to a T. And that's a lot easier said than done, in my opinion. Even when I got to wrestle like post-collegiately, and I was, wrestling in these international tournaments, and I was wrestling for Cael and the Nittany Lion Club and those guys. I still hadn't figured that out yet, what that truly meant. Now, sometimes being removed from the sport a little and just being able to think and maturity, obviously, I totally get where they're coming from, and being just able to fully give your all. And, if that's a win or a loss, so be it, either way. But you compete to the best of your ability, you have fun doing it, and you honor God in the process. And it's like that's their philosophy, and it's obviously they're going for their 8th national title coming up here in the next month. And you'll see if you can watch those wrestlers, and I'm sure you have, Ryan. I'm sure everyone listening probably. It just looks like they're having fun.
Yeah, so much fun.
They're having fun out. It doesn't. It just looks like they're they're playing games, and a lot. And don't get me wrong. They have some of the top athletes out there. We all know that, and they have some of the best pedigree. But it's still a fun environment that they've created. That culture that they've created there.
Well, and it's like that they're wrestling freely, which is when you perform your best, right? Everyone knows that when you're nervous or tight, it's not your best effort, and you're not able to react, or you're not able to maybe think as clearly. So they're doing, technically they're superior, and then mentally they're like able to put these guys in some state where they're just, that flow state you hear about more and more lately, is they're just optimal capacity when they get on the mat, and they're not worrying about like people's expectations about them, or they're not worrying about, losing. It kind of comes back to the thought of, and this sounds cheesy, but I love this. Oprah said this, that all emotions are a root of fear or love, and like they're not fearing the outcome, they're loving the process, and they just can't get enough of it. It looks like, man, I love watching them.
You're one, man. You hit it on the nail on the head right there. Your intelligence there to dig in and see that is pretty spot on, because you're absolutely correct. They're loving what they're doing. Let's put it that way. They're loving their time, and they're enjoying the experience.
Now, do you think, this may be a dumb question, but do you think they're busting their ass just as hard as anyone else, or are they working smarter than everybody else?
I think so. Here's my thought on that. That's a great question. Yes on both of those. They work hard, extremely hard. However, they don't let emotion come into their work ethic. Let me explain what I mean here, okay? For example, when I was on their staff, we lost. Oh man. Okay. Well, here's a better example. When I was on my prior staff, they were from the And again, I am not. I owe those guys everything. That coaching staff they're the best. But we had a real bad loss to Minnesota my senior year, and we came back, and it was like the effort wasn't there. It was just a bad performance. We came back, and I think we trained at like midnight. Like the plane landed, we were down in the room wrestling as just, I don't want to say punishment, but just like, all right, we're going to figure this out kind of thing. Cael and them and this might be a little bit too in coming in, but they set their schedule at the beginning of the year, and they do not deviate from it. So it's basically they have their rest days. They want their athletes resting. They understand, and I think that's pretty evident in the fact that, I think there was a couple injuries this year with RBY, got hurt in the knee, but he did like a crazy backflip, which obviously is not, the most. That's not ideal, obviously, to not prevent it.
Guy's crazy, yeah.
Crazy, right? Yeah, but like if you look at their staff, or their team, like there's just not a lot of there's not a lot of guys sitting out for a lot of huge injuries, and I think a lot of that is a testament to them sticking to the schedule that they put out in the beginning of the year when preseason starts, and they have it aligned with what they're going to do leading up for peaking at the right time come nationals. I mean, look at it, Ryan. If you look at the Big Ten tournament over the last couple of years, I don't know the statistics here. Maybe you do, but they didn't win last year, and I don't think they won the year before.
I think Ohio State the ultimate won both goal. Years.
Yeah. Ohio State, I think, won the last two. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, the ultimate goal for them is competing at their absolute best at the national championship. And I really believe that's done through the process of not deviating from the plan put in place.
The discipline not to sway off course is incredible because it's, maybe you have a loss here or there and you want to start changing things, but it's just the trust and confidence in the system is incredible. And again, it gets back to the process. Fascinating stuff, man. And I appreciate you sharing on that. As we move to the latter part of this, you're in sales and we're both in outside sales. You're in financial sales, I believe, on the wholesale side
Correct.
of the business. So maybe just talk about how wrestling set you up for that. And you hit on it a little bit earlier with the mindset, but maybe just share your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think sales is like a wrestler's I think that's like their ultimate job, because it's like how hard are you going to work to get what you want kind of thing. Now, there's a lot of other elements that go into that, as you're well aware of, and I'm sure everyone that's going to listen to this, they're like, hey, that's pretty obvious, you work hard to get good things happen. But I think wrestlers just have a tenacity and like just and this is what I take into it is just like, and there's a fine line obviously, but I just take into it like literally I'm going to bust my butt, I'm going to work harder, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to kind of win the sale in a way. Now, there's an annoyance level that you can't you can't be annoying in sales, However, there's just ways you can go the extra mile or the extra, whatever to basically build relationships and win sales. And I do believe sales is sales and it's relationship building at its finest. I think the best people I've been around that are good at it are the guys that are out there, they have that happy-go medium where they're friends with their clientele, but they also can ask and they can land the sale kind of thing. I'll tell you, Ryan,
isn't that the finest line, dude?
It's the finest line. It really is. This is super cheesy, but man, my wife she's a baller at it. She's in sales as well. She sells staffing. She's an account manager with them, and she can. Yeah. She does. I watch her. Not that I've been sitting in offices with her, but she crushes it. And I learned a lot just from her. I'm very non-confrontational, and I learned a lot of like you have to kind of get to a point, and then like you said, fine line. There comes a fine line now where you have to ask for the sale, and make your relationship kind of known and your partnership. It is a fine line. I love just listening to sales individuals. I read a lot of books. Hopefully that help me, leadership books and just the things of that nature. But it's great. Sales is great because you eat what you kill, essentially.
Definitely. And man, it's funny you say that about your wife. And this is sexism in the best possible way. The best reps I've been around are women who have that relationship, but they are firm when they need to be firm and they can push them when they need to be pushed. I haven't seen a guy master it yet where they're not coming off in a cheesy kind of way. So I don't know what it is.
I know.
This lady at my last job was that she would sit down. They would have, if it's a lunch meeting, it's different. But then when they get to the boardroom, and she would say things that would make my skin crawl. She's so direct, but they appreciate it. The clients most of the time appreciate it. They really do. But
I think Ryan, I think, not to interrupt you, I think you're right on with honesty and just the cheesiness aspect. You know what I mean? I never want to come across cheesy, but I also want to always come across as respectful and there's a fine. You're right about that with the women, and I don't know if we teed this up, but it's like National Women's Day or something. I just heard it on the radio a little bit ago. So
is it really? I didn't know that.
It's something I didn't. I just heard it before we got on the call. So
yeah,
but yeah, they do. There's a fine line there that women have kind of mastered, and I'm just trying to learn after a lot of what I've seen. So
yeah, well, it's you want them to, when they see Aaron's calling or they see Ryan's calling, you want them to want to pick up the call. Right, but at the same time, it's a business, and they know. The thing is that they know you're there to grow your business. It's not a secret to them, right?
Right.
And hopefully you're there because they have a problem to solve. And so if you can kind of juggle that, but also build the trust along the way, the more they're going to tell you. So it's step one, build trust, build the relationship. And step two is, when you hear something that you think you can solve, then you inject yourself. And you're not afraid to do it, right? There's so many pieces to it. That's why I love it, dude.
I think you made the biggest point there. Probably that success for my career is when you said hear. It's all about listening, and this is true for my wife and my marital relationship. Is I could hear her, but until I listened and fully understood, that's when things changed. I think in sales, all too often people are, and I was this way for several years. I've been in this role now for 4 years. But I think at all too first, you go in there with an agenda and you're like, I have to get this, this, and this in front of this person to land the sale. Where I don't think that's the case at all. You know what I mean? I think you need to listen, find what the issue is essentially, and then interject a solution or, help with solve that problem kind of thing.
Right.
That's really what I've learned over the years. Yeah.
Well, it's if you're feeling uncomfortable in there, they're feeling way more uncomfortable. So it's but then there's also, the last thing I'll say before we move on is, sometimes if you're not asking questions that make you uncomfortable, you're not doing your job either. So there's just so many levels to it, man. And I know with wrestling, there's guys who like that, Yanni Yakamahalas. I listened to a podcast with him, and he says what he loves about it is that there's so many levels, and there really is. And that's why I think wrestlers and you make great salespeople for the work ethic, but also for the learning, right? The learning can never stop. And so there's two pieces of it there. I could riff with you about this stuff all day, man, but I know I only asked for 30 minutes and we're over time here. Can we just move into a few more quick fire questions and then we'll let you go?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I'm good. I'm good till 12. So yep. Or
okay,
my time,
perfect.
11 years.
So when you used to visualize in college, would you do it at a certain point in time, like in the morning or after workout, or would you just kind of do it throughout the day?
Throughout the day. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know if you want me to elaborate more on that, but yeah, if you want
Please.
to go rapid fire, I can.
Definitely. Yeah. No.
Throughout the day, I think when you're wrestling at those levels, you're fully ingrained. You know what I mean? In my mind, I was there at that point to my senior year to win a national title, graduate was secondary. Yeah, that was going to happen regardless. You know what I mean? Where a lot of people are, let's get our education and then whatever else follows. I would think about it consistently. I remember being in class and just visualizing the ultimate match. I remember going in before the Big Ten and national tournament. I didn't overlook anybody, but my ultimate goal was Cole Conrad because I wasn't his nemesis, but he was mine. I couldn't overcome that. And I would just envision how that match would go in a perfect setting, which it never did. But yeah, it was consistent for me, truthfully.
Yeah, it was nonstop. And do you visualize a big meeting you have? If you have a presentation, have you carried that over to work? I
was awesome. Lead into that. Yes, absolutely. Especially now as I get more into my career and into my, what I'm doing here is I'm not a problem that has an issue getting up in front of anyone and doing public speaking. It's always been pretty natural for me, and I can joke around and do it. But as I've gotten older, I've learned I need to practice and I need to visualize like how that's going to go. And basically, I should say, turn the knobs on my presentation every time I do it. So one thing I started to implement into my career is I've started practicing this in the hotel room, or even if it's at home in the evenings, where I'll actually, if I have a big presentation or a big meeting, I will lay it out and do it beforehand. And then in my mind think, okay, what could I have done better? And it's really helped truthfully. And I honestly just started this probably in the last 6 months, through people I've heard and people that have done that in my company.
Yeah, it's incredible how much more confident you feel because, the mind doesn't know if it's happening, if it's physically happening or not, right? So if you're doing the meeting 2 or 3 times in your head ahead of time and then doing it out loud, by the time you get in there and do it in front of the customers, it's the 4th or 5th time you've done it, right? So yeah. I love that. And
yep.
I had this Jake Herbert on the podcast almost a year ago, and
yep.
he said this because he used to visualize a lot, and he's like, listen, if you're not doing that in sales, he's like, I don't know why you wouldn't, because you should be doing it like 3 or 4 times in your head before you even get there. And so I've been in sales about 4 years at that time. And then since then, and to your point, I've done it where, okay, 5 days out from the meeting or 3 days out from the meeting, I'm going to visualize in my head first. I'll go and practice it out loud, then visualize it one more time. And just that is like leaps and bounds better because you find things that you maybe would have ran on or rambled about, but you just tighten it up.
Absolutely, man. It's all about preparation. And it's like kind of like if we raise the wrestling, like you don't go into a big match unprepared. And it's the same way I think about meetings, the same
yep.
sense. Another thing I do quite often too is bounce ideas off my colleagues and peers. I got a couple friends that are in the industry, some obviously a lot within my firm, but a couple that are in other firms. And I talk quite consistently with them and just ask them their idea and what they would do. And that's very helpful too, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the battle of not being too proud or too much ego to ask for help. And I don't get that sense at all from you.
And honestly, to be candid, Ryan, I think I probably learned that from Cael, if we relate back to him, because he considered one of the best wrestlers ever amateur to come out of the United States. He's always looking for a constructive criticism or a better way of doing it. He's never once had that approach where, hey, I'm the best, it's the way. No, this has worked, but if there's a better way, I'd love to see it, kind of thing.
God, and it's that it comes back to just getting. It sounds so cheesy, but 1% better a day. I've lately become I get down these rabbit holes there, and lately I've been obsessed with this concept of the Toyota production system, and the guy who invented Toyota in the 40s. They're now one of the largest car manufacturers in the world, and it happened so fast. But they have this concept of Kaizen, Kaizen, where it literally means the pursuit of perfection. And they have these things at the Toyota plants. They're called the Kanban cords. And if you're on the plant floor and you notice something could be better, like this shelf could be moved 2 inches closer, or whatever, it could be the smallest thing. They pull this cord, they document the improvement, and then it's implemented the next day. It's like, just think if like we were all that diligent about improving the things we notice each and every day and then putting them into our new habits. It's like it explodes your mind to think about how much better you could be,
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Man, crazy stuff. Okay. Second to last question. What are some of your favorite books you've read lately outside of the Goggins one?
that one was awesome. I read this book called Legacy. It's about the Brazilians, it's a rugby team over in New Zealand. They're considered like the best. I don't know their record, or I don't want to misstate them. And essentially it talks about their success and, their process for success and what, basically where that's come from. And it's, for them, it was all about, and I'll let the audience listen to it and read that book. Great book though. But for them, it's all about process, and being regimented in their process and just essentially just doing everything correctly, from practicing to preparation to even getting up in the morning. It's just really interesting to see why they've had their success they've had and why they're just elite when it comes to rugby. Book I'm reading right now is called Washington. It's a biography on Washington's life.
What's it called?
It's called Washington. It's a New York Times bestseller.
Okay.
Ron Churchow is the author. It's really a biography about Washington's life, but our CEO of my company, Jim Bowen, recommended that all of us read this back at the end of the year Christmas party meetings we've had. And he just said he's one of the great pioneers of our country, one of our founding fathers, obviously. But just the things that Washington did and just his leadership. So it's a long book, but I'm only a little bit into it. That'd be the other one. And then
That's
I
a
just
good one
got
too.
done. I just read Jocko. He's a Navy SEAL, not Jocko.
Jocko Willink.
Yes. Leadership. Dichotomy of Leadership, I think it's called. That was my book before that, so I'm like 4 books removed from that. Great book. I love Navy SEALs. I think they're the elite of the elite. So he relates basically his SEALs experiences to his leadership roles and how that's transpired into basically, the business world and that. So awesome books, all 4 of them.
Yeah, and those podcasts that Jocko's done with Joe Rogan, that Goggins has done with Joe Rogan, and then I think Jocko was on Tim Ferriss too, and that's how he started his own, eventually. And he's like a superstar now. I mean, that guy's incredible. But Jocko and David Goggins are just they're the elite of the elite if you're looking for some motivation.
Absolutely, I can't agree more.
And then last question before we kind of round out the impact wrestling's had is, do you have any routines that you you think separate you or kind of how you structure your day? Anything around that?
Yeah, so my world's a little different in the fact that 3 days to 4 days a week I'm on the road. I'm in a hotel. Well, 2 to 3 days, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then I'm family basically Friday through Monday back home, meaning I'm still working on those days, but I'm working from home. We have a 4-year-old daughter. She's at daycare. I typically work from back to home. So yes, my routine is every morning I get up and I work out. Now that workout, I run a lot. If you saw me today, you might be like, that dude runs a lot. But I try to get somewhere within a marathon of running in during the week. That's my goal in my mind. So that's my ultimate goal. I've been pretty consistent with it, 2019. And then the other thing is, I just kind of take some time in the morning and I hate to call it New Year's resolutions, but my wife and I kind of deemed it as being uncomfortable for the new year. And I've been trying to become more, I should say, intellectual with common affairs, common things that affect me in my world. So I try every morning too. I put on, I listen to Ben Shapiro a lot, Joe Rogan, but I try to just make myself uncomfortable with things that I'm not real familiar with, like, current events or whatever that may be. So that might be reading the paper as I'm getting breakfast or listening to a podcast as I'm going to a meeting. That's my typical routine. And then on the weekends, our life's pretty crazy. Obviously living in the city of Chicago as yourself and having a little girl. So I try to work out every day during the weekend, but that's not always first thing in the morning. It's just kind of what suits our family schedule or what we're doing at that time. So.
Yep. And your wife seems like an absolute animal, man. Maybe she should be on the podcast sometime.
She should, dude.
So cool,
she's the boss, man. She crushes it. But no, she's with not trying to sound cheesy at all. We're in a very nice situation, and we complement each other nicely in the way we motivate. So
that's awesome, man. And hey, real quick before we close it out, I gotta know. I know you're a UFC fan, right? Did you watch the Askren match this weekend?
Oh yeah, I wasn't gonna miss Ben fight.
Well, okay.
Roller. Yep.
Was he? I'm obsessed with Ben Askren. Ben Askren, if you're listening, I'm trying to get you on the podcast, brother. You'll be on it.
Get him on, man.
You just don't know it yet, dude. I love that guy. I just watched the Flow film, Funk. Have you watched it yet?
Have watched the what? I'm sorry.
Flow Wrestling did a hour-long documentary called Funk. It's about Askren.
Oh yeah. I watched it. It was awesome. It was so awesome.
Dude, how jacked does that get you? Like, he was so obsessed with wrestling He's like 9 moves in advance. It's incredible what he thought about.
It really is incredible how he evolved and like taught himself that. Yeah, it was awesome to hear that.
Dude, and the fact that he beat Herbert 14-2, crazy. Go ahead.
No, I didn't even know that actually. Because they're both legends of the sport. But listen to him. He's on Rudis, so he's involved now with that Rudis clothing company. And him and Matt Derlin. Well, Matt Derlin's one of my best friends. His daughters were at my wedding, actually. They do a podcast every week, and Ben talks about the fight. If you listen to it, they spend about 20 minutes talking about. Ben talks about his experience last week in the Octagon and everything. So, are you asking me my thoughts on it and if Lawler was done or what?
So I got it. Do you think he was done? I don't think he was, but man, I don't know.
This is my thought. If he wasn't done, he was going to be done. From what I hear about Ben, and I don't personally, I met Ben a couple times, I don't personally know him real well. His grip is unbelievable, and people might say he might have squeezed himself out there. I highly doubt that. And even if he wasn't under the chin, you can still choke someone out from being around the neck, like on the jaw or whatever. Even if he wasn't done, it looked like his arm did go limp, but he also packed up so like spry that it seemed like, well, how did that happen? You know what I mean? I think he would have been done if he wasn't done. Let's just put it that way.
I agree. I mean, there's no way Ben Askren's arms are going to gas out, and like he's just too mentally tough for that. I mean, the guy might be the most mentally tough person ever, especially to take that beating at the beginning and come back. I mean, unbelievable. And like Robbie Lawler is the former world champ, and he beat him in his first fight, dude. It's like, are you kidding me?
I texted Derlin right away, and I said, that's one of the toughest dudes I've ever seen. To take picked up and dropped on your head like that and then get punched in the face like 5 times from that guy it's not a joke.
Well, not only that, like right before he got dropped on his head, he was like putting a master class of a takedown on him. I think he took him down.
I know.
Did like a little drag by. It was like, couldn't have gone better. It was just surprising to see him get launched like that. And then, I mean, Lawler, have you ever seen someone more physically imposing in your life than that guy at that fight?
No.
He looked incredible.
They said it in that podcast, but they said that's like the best he's looked in a long time. And I would agree with that. I'm like yourself. I'm pretty much a fan and watch all those things. And yeah, it was incredible.
He looked so fit, man. Yeah, it was awesome. What a great card. I'm curious to see what happens. I cringe when I hear how much Askren and Dana do not get along. I just don't think that's going to be good for Askren long term. But who knows? I mean, I don't know how it all works, but they do not care for each other at all.
It's funny you say that. I thought the same thing, but I think Ben maybe knows what he's doing. I don't know. I hope he's around because I love watching him. He's good for he's good for our community. He's good for that sport. I believe that.
Definitely. And I've gone in and out on the Rudis podcast. I used to listen to T-Row and Funky all the time with Tommy Rowland.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
I got to get especially as the Big Tens are coming here. I can't wait. I'm gonna buff up on it, but I definitely wanted to I will listen to that one. I also love Askren's Mental Mondays. If you guys haven't, not even you, Aaron, but even the listeners, they are gold. 10 minutes of gold, dude, every morning, every Monday.
Totally agree. Yep, I totally agree. Zero out there.
Yeah, he does. Well, hey, this is the wrap up here. So I know we've talked a lot about wrestling and the impact, and it's probably pretty obvious to how it's impacted your life. But if you had to, tell a parent or someone, hey, I'm thinking about letting my kid wrestle, why would you say yes to letting him wrestle? Like, what would you say to that?
Awesome. 35 is my age, and everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling. And I truly mean that wholeheartedly. If my advice to a parent letting a child wrestle is don't be one of those crazies. Let them have fun with it. Let them take their losses because you learn more through a loss than any win you'll ever have, in my honest opinion. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Honestly, Ryan, that's why what I would totally tell a parent.
I love it, man. I couldn't agree more on that. That's probably no surprise to anyone listening. But dude, I had a great time having you on. We'd love to have you back in a few months here and circle back on things. And best of luck to you today at that lunch meeting, man. Get after it. Hey, I really appreciate it, Ryan. It's awesome and kind of interesting how we did that. But
Thank you. I feel honored to be on here, and I'd love to be back in a couple months. So thanks again.
Sounds good, man. All right,
That's
take
the
care.
end of this episode, but definitely not the end of the show. For more episodes, please go to wrestlingchangemylife.org. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Give us a star rating. Show the love, baby. Show the love. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. Peace.